So you've heard about Bitcoin and it works with blockchain, but do you know about Ethereum? And have you considered decentralization? How about DAOs in your data, DeFi, open source software, crypto Twitter, ETH 2.0, Mt. Gox stacks, sidechain, state channels, consensus mechanisms? Welcome to Square One, a place to deepen your crypto knowledge. Hey everybody, thanks for joining this a new episode of Square One. I have Louis Groux. Am I pronouncing Giraux? Is that
The French pronunciation is Giraux.
Giraux?
But yeah, it's
Perfect.
thanks.
Well, yeah, no, I have Luis here, and I'm excited to talk to him. He's been building across the ecosystem in a variety of projects, specifically around DAOs and social tokens. And so I don't know. With this conversation, I'd love to kind of discuss some of the basic fundamentals of what for someone who has no context of what these systems are. Like, what do I need to know about DAOs and like crypto in order to actually begin participating and understanding things. And I think Luis has a really amazing perspective on that. But yeah, Luis, would you mind introducing yourselves and giving us a bit of your background?
Sure, man. Thanks so much. Super happy to be here for I think one of the first conversations that you have on Square One, and talked about this new project, and we'll definitely follow it very closely. I think it's super important to build these places for to gather intelligence and gather the right minds to really build an interesting knowledge base for the space, and spread the right gospel around DAOs and make people understand what it's about and all these things. Really appreciate the initiative. And yeah, so about me, I started working in crypto 2 years ago. My angle and the way um, I fell into the rabbit hole was through governance and governance topics. At the time, Ethereum governance was the big thing. How decisions were taken for the Ethereum blockchain, EIPs, and all these things. It was the main governance topic in the whole space. And started working with Aragon. Worked with Aragon for a while, coordinating different developer teams, working on different aspects of the product. Then finally left after a year or so of very interesting projects, with still very big interest in governance, and morphed that into contributions to several open source projects in the space for some time. Started writing and writing a Substack newsletter on DAOs and basically more broadly DAO tooling and DAO projects, reporting about use cases and things that seemed interesting to me, and also kind of chatting, talking about the importance of in this DAO paradigm of these coordinators and community managers, or community builders using these tools, these new technologies, to build these new kind of or social systems or organizations online, to get people together to coordinate trustlessly and seamlessly online. So really, this has been the main objective for me, allow most as many people as possible to just go for these new ways of doing entrepreneurship and creating value and getting people together and getting society moving forward. Yeah, so that's been the main focus. And 6 months ago, joined Super Rare to help them on the community aspects of the project, very broadly, doing some content there, working with the community strategy, um, but also I'd like to help, moving forward. I'd help artists build their communities also using Web3 tools, and helps Super further structure his kind of DAO infrastructure. Yeah, so that's most of it. Having lots of fun, obviously, especially these days. Lots of things happening, and I'm super stoked because it looks like DAOs are finally. I mean, I NFTs have been the big thing, but DAOs are getting sexier and sexier. So I think that I'm super stoked about that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think DAOs are still undervalued, I'd say, as far as the topic of conversation within
Yeah.
the hype cycle, right? Like the DAO hype hasn't quite breached its critical maximum where NFTs are currently the biggest thing, and ICOs were previously. But yeah,
Yeah.
I also think that like DAOs will. I mean, that is the most interesting topic of conversation within crypto networks. I think personally.
Totally.
Um,
The all
um,
encompassing
they
topic.
are all encompassing, yes, and like they are required in order for the systems to function in a fully decentralized way. It also is like it's kind of the like human governance side of the organizations that are being built within these like new types of resource networks. Um,
Totally.
I'd love to actually dig into the first point that you made about actually getting into Ethereum governance with the EIPs. What was that experience like? Like, how did you find yourself contributing there?
So, to be entirely transparent, like when I got to, so it was started like really looking, more deeply at crypto around 2017 or something. Um, and and eventually, so I was looking for an angle to contribute. I was in the technical profile myself, and I had more of a like financial background, VC kind of thing. Had gone to a business school, so basically like I had this kind of rough understanding of like what's a company, and what's governance, and what kind of typical problems you're facing, governance, information asymmetries, agency problems, and all these things. And so that it created kind of my interest for more like what's the governance system for Ethereum, like what are the weaknesses and all these things. And so most of the time, like I just like um, looked at Ethereum governance from afar, kind of following, not at the technical level, but more like at the human level, how coordination happened, how developer calls happened, how people like Hudson Jameson were coordinating really all this process and getting things together. How you had like these kind of rights and events, recurring events created along the years in the Ethereum community. Like all this social process really interested me. Um, and yeah, so I didn't like directly contribute to any EIP. Was mostly a passive, follower of the whole process. But kind of drove also like my first understanding of the space, and why I thought at the time like on-chain governance was something that was needed, token voting was needed, and all these things. So kind of like brought me to contribute, like yeah, to try anticipate things and contribute to some other upcoming projects.
Interesting. That makes sense. And yeah, it's interesting to see like how the Ethereum network of off-chain coordination did develop in order to facilitate on-chain decisions and like protocol upgrades and things. It's
Yep.
certainly a complex and nuanced system that I think also is probably more. It has more structure than say Bitcoin's system because Bitcoin is generally a bunch of thought leaders and maximalists who don't want to change the
Yeah.
code, and its main point is immutability, right? As opposed to
Yep.
Ethereum, which is more focused on optimizing functionality and providing flexible in a flexible environment to continue building value in applications. I think.
Totally. No, I agree, and I kind of feel that it's kind of it's always this the tech improvement at the governance level is like it feels like we're just learning through different waves of projects, and these projects get obviously like the thing grows, and it gets a certain level of inertia. And so like when you're talking about Bitcoin, like the stability or like the inertia of like governance, and not having governance basically almost is kind of like in the DNA of Bitcoin. But also like it's just like now set in stone because the project is so big, and the culture is so anchored and hard to change. I think Ethereum is like an kind of like um a new like yeah a step forward in terms of like flexibility and attention, just like putting governance at the service of another thing, which is like that building and all these things. And I feel like projects building now on top of Ethereum, you also have like several waves of these like new types of governance schemes and stuff. So basically like Ethereum didn't, the guys at the time like the Vitaliks and Vlads and whatever, who wanted to, who were kind of like leading the discussions on Ethereum at the time, didn't want to have like on-chain voting and all these things. But on-chain voting was like tried by all this wave of DeFi projects that we now have, who are like using this kind of standard compound AVI style of governance. With a discourse forum, an off-chain voting, Gnosis multisig, and so that's a new wave. And I feel like even these projects now, like when you listen to like this, for example, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Andre Cronje
Mm,
or Cron,
mm-hmm.
who is like leading Yearn. He often talks about governance and the pains of token voting and the low participation and all these things. And now we're learning about that, and I feel like we'll have yet another wave of projects kind of learning from that, and implementing corrections to address different pains.
Yeah,
But yeah, it seems like off chain is definitely the thing for the latest waves of projects, off
that
chain
makes
voting.
sense. Can we actually dig into that? I think like what is the typical structure of a DAO today? Um, and it'd be fun to kind of go through a thought train of like where like how do you actually implement progressive decentralization? And maybe also
Yeah.
we could discuss different other potential models that have been implemented that are maybe contradictory to progressive decentralization and take a different path.
Totally, yeah. I think at the very it's about, it's also about like what culture you want to set and what are your intentions and objectives and stuff, what you want to maximize. But it's always like, I mean, the space, especially, I think it's all the time. It's always the case in life, but like it's always about trade-offs, like trade-offs between decentralization and performance, for example, like trade-offs between like UX and whatever, and speed, and the lower speed or whatever. And so I think in terms of like in governance, it's kind of like, I mean, we've been like having lots of lots of ideals, and especially around voting and token voting, and also like one person one vote and all these things that will also kind of bringing from our conceptions of what's good governance, from our values and the governance that we've, for example, like state governance or whatever, like one person one vote, everyone should be able to have like this ability to vote and stuff like. um, and so yeah, we're kind of realizing that in most situations like these systems are like have lots of friction and stuff. And we have to adapt like different levels of uh, different levels of um, uh, uh, importance and legitimacy in the governance system. Like you cannot basically vote on, let everyone vote on everything, otherwise that's too much friction. That's like people don't really know how and what to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
But to come back on your first thing, about what's the typical DAO. um, so I mean, DAO is like this all encompassing, very like abstract thing. I think you agree with me. Like it's the early descriptions are like research papers, and what's in research papers usually is like math and almost like also like the general theory of relativity. It's very very wide, very abstract, but applications can be can vary and can be very concrete. So I think we have to narrow down to like a number of use cases to make that country. I think like first, like you have different types of DAOs. So Bitcoin and Ethereum, like algorithmic DAOs, basically just like by the code of like uh, their clients and how they're designed. They match like this kind of like miners. I mean, yeah. Services from miners to users who want to use the network, do transactions, use dApps, and all these things. That's the most like decentralized and autonomous, I think, DAOs that we have today. And then you have a whole
Which type?
spectrum that goes. Um, I'd say like the Bitcoin and Ethereum
Mm,
networks, and perhaps we have like other examples, and perhaps also like other smaller networks are like more decentralized and more autonomous. But I guess like in the case of Bitcoin, I think that's the biggest DAO in existence, algorithmic DAO. I mean, everything is automated. You just have like this kind of group of core developers making improvements to the product. But otherwise, like it's pretty much autonomous and just like self-sustaining. You don't really need to maintain it. If we were to just like stop maintaining, it would still work. It would suck more than it should, but it would work. And so yeah, and after that, like you have this all different degrees of decentralization and autonomy, um, that go to through like these DeFi projects which are fairly decentralized and fairly autonomous, but you have like more like this more maybe leaders, multi-sig signers, more like clear points of centralization in smaller ecosystems, which make the thing a bit more, maybe the human intervention is a bit more like frequent. They do more grades, there's more agility, so that's a trade-off between like kind of like this decentralization and agility, and these leaders kind of like help sustain the momentum of the project, yeah, and have clear direction or be more like agile. And then you have like, and I think the opposite of the spectrum will be like tokenized communities, um, things that are spawned around creators, which are in a way like ideologic, very centralized around like one single team or a single person, because it's about the creator, it's about this founder or this guy writing a newsletter. Um, and this get fairly autonomous, but yeah, there's much more daily human coordination involved, much more, yeah, it's much more human in a way, so less centralized, less decentralized, less systematic in a way.
that makes sense. I would even say that, well, I think it's a hard distinction to say whether these community or social tokens that you're describing, or these, I think creator tokens specifically might make uh, there's like less of a decentralized aspect because it's literally focused on one creator. But for some of these, it's also like a community token, and it may be about a type of creator or a philosophy or an idea. And for those, I see those as being potentially even more decentralized than like a Moloch DAO, for instance, where Moloch, you just have a bunch of people kind of governing shared resources that they all contributed to, and giving grants and sort of making votes, where a community a community token network could branch out and become, I don't know, have multiple initiatives going on at the same time that are not necessarily tied to a central decision making force. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you think about that.
No, I think you're totally right. I think it's really like it's a bit easy to solve all our questions, but like there are no rules to
Hmm.
to how decentralized or how autonomous these things are. I think like obviously like the autonomous aspect is depends a lot on how much software you're using to automate things and coordinate people. Uh, so, for example, like Discord is a platform that lets people interact online, but has very low intelligence. I mean, you need a human to structure it to make it smart. Create new channels, assign roles, and all these things. I expect that over time we'll have like more and more tools that have like software, computer intelligence, AI kind of thing. Adding on top of that, because like now we're interacting on this forum, discourse forums, whatever, like and yeah, it takes days to kind of like go make your way through the noise, find the right information, connect with the right people, and all these things. I expect that this will be assisted more and more by things like AI and stuff. um, but yeah, I agree. Like coming back to the Moloch point and the fact that a Moloch DAO is by default kind of centralized through this like voting system. um, you can definitely envision. I mean, if we took like for example friends with benefits in terms of like the tokenized community, that they are like leadership is very centralized, because like you have this few people like Trevor, Cooper, and the rest of the team, and the staff who are kind of leading and taking critical decisions. There's been a hack recently, the raw hot wallet has been hacked, and token, basically token went to the floor. And so like the leadership team was there to kind of bridge this moment of crisis, and explain what's going to happen, what are the next steps, and all these things. That's where like leadership is really critical, especially ours. We're in the early days um, of the space, and anytime there's an uncertainty or doubt or anything, like you need someone to step in and fill the uncertainty, fill the void. um, so in that they're more centralized. um, but yeah, but the creation process itself, like maybe it's not the leadership, but maybe the creation process is decentralized. Like all these artists and creatives in the Friends with Benefits Discord all have different ways to make contributions to this community, and maybe have different projects, and in that, like, yeah, you could consider it very decentralized.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I think that's definitely the case. And I think another great example would be like One Hive, as far as like a token that has been distributed around a community. That community is clearly a little more distinct, because it's not like a creative as much as it is a technical creative, like product development, uh, like
Yeah,
ecosystem, which is, I think, really, I don't know. I always like come back to them as being a very unique example of a very successful token economy that was built from a
I'd love
decentralized aspect.
yeah, I'd love to hear, because like I so Luke, who founded Hive, was a colleague at the time I was at Aragon,
Mm,
and it's been some time that I took some distance from Hive, more because like like just contributing to other projects. But I love like
mm.
what, and I keep hearing people, OGs like you and others coming up and saying Hive is so cool. Yeah, I don't know, like what are your thoughts on Hive? I'd be super curious, like.
Yeah, I mean, my impression is that it's one of the only token communities that has been able to, instead of working from a product centric, um, progressive decentralized framework of development of the token economy, they actually worked from
Mm,
a social reputation framework of people who were building, and then, kind of, it was partially, coming from the right place as far as their intention and the way that they were distributing tokens and the way that they were building. And then, they were dedicated to this for, I don't know, probably 6 months to a year prior to someone, it may have been 2 years actually, prior to someone actually like, uh, buying into their token economy. And essentially, it went from a group of builders who were kind of exchanging more reputation than actual value, to then,
mm,
a group of builders who had been distributing this reputation now owning a token economy that had millions of dollars of value. And in
mm,
part, that was because of a meme, I believe, on like 4chan or something like that. Whenever they moved into XDAI, but
yeah.
I do think that it's done a remarkable job at creating a fertile environment for people to come into and contribute, and sort of build real tech that many, I see that as a very hard thing to initiate in such an organic way. And I don't know if anyone else has really done it in this way using a fluid token economy.
No, I think yeah. I mean, I think that in terms of like being a decentralized, community based, community led project, I definitely think that Luke is one of the most. And I don't know about the other leaders that came up, because there you always have this kind of like core team that comes together naturally. But yeah, I definitely Luke was one of the most forward thinking and meticulously thinking individual in the space, and has a great sensitivity towards designing systems that make sense. And I think it really yeah, I think it really like the feeling I have is like they've taken like the decentralized community approach, then building, then started building something like the Uniswap swap work on XI that you were mentioning. um when yeah, the traditional path, which I still think is like, I don't know. um I don't know what's the ideal path. Like, is it you should build and get some traction, and then using this momentum create a community around it, or is it the more and more people obviously say get community first and then start building after, or monetizing after.
Hmm.
Um, I think both approach work, but also are going to decide on the culture of your project moving forward. Are you community first? Are you kind of like, yeah, tool first or startup first?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the new
Yeah.
thing is the earlier.
The new thing is what?
I think the new thing is really like this community first.
Hmm.
Things.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is hard, and I think that the startup first model is probably a little bit faster to implement, a little bit easier to coordinate in the beginning because you're just dealing with fewer people in some ways, and incentives are a bit tighter because you're likely have some funding to incentivize that initial team, that core team
Yep.
of builders. Whereas going from a community first model, it really does need to be more driven via ideology and values, which is a longer term outlook. I think
Yep.
in general, right? You have to have a very long term outlook to develop a community with the right incentives and values. And
100%.
I think there's a lot of I think like Andre Cronje or Cronje, yeah, whichever it is, um, talked about this in his own in like one of his articles about how building in DeFi sucks, and he said essentially that like
Yeah.
the idea of a community, quote unquote, in DeFi is one that uh, essentially is more or less surface level. And,
Yeah.
and and in his experience, essentially all of the only people that he's the people who claim to be part of the community of Wi-Fi, for instance, they may ultimately just be giving more headache than they are providing value to the ecosystem by sort of pandering the developers like Andre himself, or just kind of like really just caring about that bottom line of like number go up. And I think
Yeah.
that's a hard distinction to make, and it's kind of hard actually in some ways to build a community once you have that initial base of people who only care about the number go up,
Yep.
right? That's
I
also a
mean,
different,
yeah.
yeah, challenge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think like the thing with like different projects, I'd say like it's also about you to know like what's the whatever. I mean, there you have these new kind of concepts like community market fit or whatever. Like basically as usual, it's about are you bringing up the right like values and ideology and product, and at the right time, and you have the right people responding to the call. And and obviously like the early days are super super like important, and who you're building for is also super important. And so like in the case of Yearn, like it just blew up last summer, and it was all about farming, all about degens, all about DeFi. So I mean, at that point, like you can expect that the type of person who's going to engage with your product will be like way more sensitive, maybe to financial incentives first than values or something like that. Not
Mm.
that people interested in finance don't have values, but like on a spectrum of people going to some other thing, maybe that's more technically minded, more oriented toward financial incentives and stuff. um, and so I think and that was and there was this Uniswap sushi swap fork during the summer. I mean, the early September, late summer, and this was really about a kind of like um, incarnation of how of the kind of people that were hanging around this project at the time. Basically, like this vampire mining that with like some financial incentives to jump on into SushiSwap rather than staying with Uniswap made like a SushiSwap a super successful project in just like a matter of days. Because people just didn't really give much care about Uniswap itself or the mission or whatever, but more like the financial protocol and what it could bring them like tomorrow or in a month or in a year. Um, so
Yep.
yeah, and circling back to your first like point that I think is super interesting, I definitely agree that like community first is like harder to bootstrap. It takes much more time and takes much more also like being much smarter on also like the communications, also like the culture of the project. I mean, but on the longer term, it becomes like such it becomes kind of unstoppable when you think about the complexity of the ecosystem now on top of Ethereum. It's hundreds of projects of people around the world. It's super diverse. Obviously it's like more Western based. There's also like this bias around white people, white developers, and whatever. But I think it's expanding quickly, and it's super. It goes into like many different areas, industries, verticals. So I definitely think like on the longer term, like now it's unstoppable, and it's getting really much bigger than Ethereum itself. And so yeah, this community approach is super super like long term. I think it's really it's absolutely the most like yeah the one like, the most performing long term now in our world, like a digital world where like communities can scale and information goes lightning fast. You want to just like let people engage as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Eh, yeah.
No, that's great. I think it makes a lot of sense. Well, yeah. I mean, this has been really great. I guess maybe one last sort of topic to touch on. I'm curious what your if you for someone who's never been involved within the crypto industry before, what advice would you have for them as far as like how to think about this, both maybe not even if they want to participate, but just like moving forward, what should people, yeah, what should people be aware of within crypto? What's the most important ideas and concepts?
Yeah. So I think it really depends. Like, so first, like, I think it's important to start with something because, like, the space can be overwhelming. I think, like, the more like you just like stay in the space and you don't really, I mean, you kind of forget how vast and overwhelming the quantity of like knowledge and areas can be. And so I think starting with like what's closest to your interests and closest to what you like. So I think like that's the magic of NFTs now. It's like it talks to tons of people, either like those who've been collecting, but also like all the creatives who tend to be early adopters in general of all things, because creatives are always on the hunt, always listening to new things and stuff. And so I think that's what's happening now with NFTs. uh, but I mean, obviously, like when I chat with people, I'm like, yeah, NFTs is great, it's fun, but like crypto has so much more in stock,
Hmm.
um, and so yeah, just start with what you're interested in. So for example, in my case was governance. I don't know what James, what it was for you, how
Hmm.
you came to the space.
Yeah, mine
Um,
was electricity actually.
oh yeah, cool.
Hmm.
And so how did you do like how did you bridge like electricity and blockchain? I mean, and blockchain space, Ethereum.
Yeah. Well, I first learned about Bitcoin or actually Ethereum because there were a bunch of projects in 2017, and this was like, riding the wave of the ICO hype. But
Yeah.
but there were a bunch of projects that were proposing a more efficient electric grid via on-demand pricing and like pricing at the time of consumption. And I thought that that would be really, really remarkable. And the idea would be to use crypto in order to essentially make the prosumer, or the people who are both producing and consuming electricity, more efficient.
Yeah.
And it turns out the infrastructure isn't quite there, but that was the hook that really got me diving into the rabbit hole heavy.
Yeah. I think what was fun about the early days is like you had everything was there. Basically, all the promises that will unfold over the next decade or two. It was kind of there, like blockchain to optimize, like the distribution or like grids and coordination around energy, music and all these things. I mean, it's all there. It just like has to be realized. So again, I think like a technology like blockchain is like the internet or whatever. You can apply it to pretty much anything. So yeah, go to something you're interested in, dig into it, maybe connect with people who are also, I think community is like the first thing that you want to go for, because that's the thing that will keep you coming back without much effort, because like you meet nice people, and you grow with them and all these things, and that's so important. I think that's the most important part of like what makes the Ethereum community a success. I don't know if it's like cool or not cool or whatever. It's successful because there are like close ties between members and relationships and stuff. So yeah, super important. Like, so yeah, jump onto like Discord of a project that you think is interesting, and the important bit is about just starting somewhere. And then James started with a electric optimizing energy stuff. I started with like governance, and now I'm more into like a crypto platform for digital art and helping tokenized communities. So yeah, start somewhere and go for it, I think is the best thing.
Oh yeah, makes sense, man. Well, hey, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and experience, and yeah, just joining me for a quick session this morning.
Yeah, I feel like I've been just chatting and saying things that I know and stuff, but I know that James knows also like tons of things. So maybe sometime I should come back and interview you instead, to have like your knowledge and insights. But thank you so much for having me. Had a great time and would love to do it again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, let me know. I'm always available.
Cool, man. Thanks
Sweet.
so much.
Thank you. If you want to explore more and deepen your understanding of cryptocurrency concepts and mechanisms available today, please visit our Gitbook, or Crypto Encyclopedia. You can find it on our website at square1.tech. Thanks for listening.